di bawah kepimpinan pengurusi, lembaga pengarah serta pasukan pengurusan yang profesional, kompeten, berwibawa. Tabung Haji kini berjaya kembali ke landasan yang lebih kukuh, mampan melalui pelan strategik reformasi serta tabik urus yang lebih baik tanpa campur tangan kerajaan.
Assalamualaikum, Salam Malaysia Madani. Now welcome to another edition of Biz Malaysia. Now we begin with a fundamental question. What needs to change to ensure that Tabung Haji remains strong, sustainable and trusted for generations to come? Now the Royal Commission of Inquiry into Tabung Haji has brought to light significant weaknesses in the institution's past governance, from leadership appointments and political influence to investment decisions, financial reporting and oversight as well. Now the findings presented in the Dewan Rakyat also raised serious concerns over investment discipline and financial sustainability. Now in response, the RCI made 25 recommendations, and the government, well, says more than 75% have already been implemented, reforms aimed at strengthening the institution and restoring confidence. But the key question remains, are these reforms enough to address long-standing weaknesses? And how do we know that they are actually working? We examine the governance, transparency, investment discipline, financial resilience and accountability with our guests in the studio later. But first, a news update closely linked to today's discussion, the call for stronger risk oversight in investment decisions. Now, technical assessments by Research and Risk Management units should be given greater consideration in the corporate governance of government-linked companies, or GLCs, to ensure strategic investment decisions are made transparently and responsibly. Now, according to corporate and business analyst Muhammad Faisal Abdul Malik, professional views should form part of the transaction approval process, particularly in efforts to strengthen the institutional autonomy of Lembaga Tabung Haji. Now, he said, all research risks, assessments and due diligence findings should be presented comprehensively to investment committee before any decision is made.
Jadi jika keputusan yang mahu dibuat bertentangan dengan penilaian due diligence tersebut, mesti ada justifikasi bertulis, penilaian bebas yang kedua, ataupun pengundian voting dalam konteks di bilik lembaga pengarah itu sendiri, serta nama mereka yang terlibat dalam pasukan meeting mesyuarat tersebut direkodkan dengan jelas supaya ada pihak yang boleh dipertanggungjawabkan kelak.
Muhammad Faisal also proposed that the heads of research and risk management units be given direct access to board of directors and protection from retaliation when providing professional opinions. And from investment governance, we turn to investor confidence. Now, Malaysia's latest global sukuk issuance has attracted strong international demand, offering a positive signal for the country's economic outlook and its position in the global Islamic finance landscape. So, what does this strong demand tell us about investor confidence in Malaysia, and can this momentum be sustained? Now, let's get an economist's perspective on this.
In my view, Malaysia's latest $1.5 billion global issuance sukuk sends a much stronger message than just the headline amount, because we can see what really stands out is the level of the investor demand. We can see that the demand stands around 9.5 billion in order, which is about 4.7 times the amount offered. To me, this is a positive indication that international investors are confident in Malaysia, particularly of course in terms of our fiscal positions, debt management, and also the overall economic condition of Malaysia. So and another thing we can see is from the Islamic perspective. I think this is also an important development for Malaysia. As we know, Malaysia has been one of the leading center for the global sukuk market, and this issuance reinforce our positions not only among Islamic investors but also among a broader pool of international international institutional investor, which is good for Malaysia. So Sukuk is increasingly being viewed not just as an Islamic finance product, but as a competitive global fixed income instrument, as we can say. The key question now is whether this momentum can be sustained. I believe it can, but we should not take this strong demand as a granted, demand for granted. You see, Malaysia needs to continue demonstrating a good fiscal discipline, keeping public debt on a sustainable path, and delivering the structural reforms that investors are expecting. So overall, I would say that describe this issuance as a strong vote of confidence in Malaysia. What matters is not that only that Malaysia managed to raise 1.5 billion. What is important is that we are able to do so with a very strong demand and highly competitive pricings, which I believe display a very strong confidence from the international investors.
Well, that was the response on Malaysia's global sukuk, a positive signal for the Islamic finance landscape and investor confidence. Now, coming up, THRCI, reforming governance, strengthening investor confidence. That's next on Biz Insight. Stay with us.
Last 16 with the 7-4.
Barcelona has approved a plan to double the city's tourism tax beginning April.
Malaysian Marine Affairs and Fisheries Ministry. Yes, as Thailand as well. We're entering spots in Mexico.
Last 16 with the 7-4.
Barcelona has approved a plan to double the city's tourism tax beginning April.
Malaysian Marine Affairs and Fisheries Ministry. Yes, as Thailand as well. We're entering spots in Mexico. Multimedia 1998, Akta 588 dan jika sabit kesalahan, anda boleh dikenakan hukuman denda sehingga RM50,000 Malaysia atau boleh dipenjara selama tempoh sehingga 1 tahun atau kedua-duanya sekali. Anda juga boleh disiasat dan dituduh di bawah undang-undang lain yang berkuat kuasa seperti Kanun Keseksaan dan Akta Hasutan 1948, Akta 15. Laporkan kes-kes berkaitan berita palsu dan 3R di saluran berikut. Tak pasti, jangan kongsi. Kekalkan keharmonian dalam masyarakat.
Padamkan komputer untuk lebih penjimatan.
Well, thank you very much for staying tuned to Biz Malaysia. Now, the RCI findings have now put the spotlight firmly on Tabung Haji, its governance, investment decisions and financial management. Now, the question now is not only what went wrong, but what needs to change to ensure those weaknesses are never repeated. And joining us today to unpack these issues is Associate Professor Dr. Muhammad Iskandar Muhammad Shah Muhammad Rashid, CEO of ISRA Associates. Thank you very much, Professor, for coming to the studio.
Thank you, Otto, for having me.
Now, the RCI found that Tabung Haji's problems developed over many years amid the weak governance, political influence, and also shortcomings in leadership appointments. From an institutional perspective, what were the biggest governance failures that allowed these problems to actually accumulate for so long?
I think before I answer that questions, I think it's important that we recognize the importance of institutions in the context of Malaysia. I think institutions like Tabung Haji, PNB, Felda, I mean, it used to be a policy institutions where it create values and also, allow the process of wealth accumulations and drive the economy. So when things like this happens, it's not just, questions the legitimacy of this institution, but more importantly, the question of trust. So to answer your questions, I mean, there are a number of things that we can highlight here. I mean, first, obviously, whether the right peoples are at the right place. I think that's very important. So again, it boils down to the appointments of the board members, the risk committee, the investment committee. So whether we have gone through the due process. So it's not just about a matter of people, but also a matter of the process itself. So sometimes you have the right process, but not necessarily governed by the right people. So it's very difficult for you to attribute the problem into one category of, okay, you restore confidence by removing people, but then the question is that, can the new people follow the right process as well? So I would say that, you really need to look at this issue holistically. So the internal governance has to be improved, and there must be a mechanism of monitoring. There must be a mechanism of reporting. And Tabung Haji cannot be seen as a special entity because they are under Ministry of Religious Affairs. The due process, the governance can be lax as compared to any other financial institutions. So when you put them equal, it's a matter of protecting the right of the depositors, the protecting of the right of people to accumulate return through a proper investment, then automatically your mindset seems to change, and the detail and the thoroughness will improve as well. So I would probably say that difficult question need to be answered here, yes.
Like what you said, Professor, there are many things are at play to ensure that trust is built back in Tabung Haji throughout these long years. Now, the RCI has recommended clearer criteria for appointing TH board members, including fit and proper requirements, and has called for active politicians to be excluded from the board. Now, how do we ensure that future appointments are based on competence, integrity and independence rather than political considerations?
This is something that Malaysia have a lot of experience. We did, for example, in the past, try to restore the confidence in the banking system, especially after the 97 crisis happens. So a lot of governance process has put in place. So Bank Negara has come up with the criteria in terms of, appointing board members. And then we have Islamic finance, and then we put itself a Sharia governance framework, how to appoint a Sharia board. So there are a lot of process and accountability has put in place in terms of positioning all these financial institutions. So sometimes we have to remember that, just adding out layer and layer of governance not necessarily means that you're going to comply to the requirements. So what matters is that there must be an internal capacity to understand what is the required to be a board member, the responsibility, the accountability, and also, a mechanism of monitoring as well. So, everybody knows that, Bank Negara has written letter to Tabung Haji, questioning some of the things and warning them some of the things. So, if precaution measures have been taken, so perhaps some of the damage can be minimized, can be mitigated in the past. But sometimes when you feel that, you are above the law, and some moral hazard happen, and you think that you are too big to fail, or because we are Tabung Haji, we're going to get continuous depositors because people still going to put money with us. We are giving them high return. They might not get this kind of return everywhere. So sometimes, I wouldn't say the word vanity. Sometimes our excessive optimism, or what we call it in finance term, irrational exuberance, sometimes may not necessarily lead to optimal decisions. Sometimes we need to be humble to recognize that there are challenges. We need to go through a proper process. We need to listen to the right people. And again, accountability and is very important. So I think in the case of Tabung Haji, it's just that many bad decisions have been made. And people have to own up to that decisions. And if people get away with this, it might be a very difficult thing to actually hold people accountable in the future. So restoring trust, I think, is very important, especially when we have gone through few governance issues in the past that put Malaysia on the spotlight. So we do not want to have another crisis, especially when we are rebuilding our economy post-COVID. Yeah.
And seeing our economy is growing very, very rapidly, I think, do you believe and trust that with this new structure that is going to be implemented, do you think that things are going to looking up for Tabung Haji in the future?
I think people have to walk the talk. It's very important that, whatever the government said about, 75% of the recommendation have been made. So there might be a proper reporting in terms of the initiative, in terms of convincing the stakeholders that, these initiatives are actually bearing results, where the investment process is much more transparent. So sometimes when you are able to communicate the narrative and the story better to the stakeholders, it itself can be also quite convincing arguments. So again, the people matters as well. So I'm sure Tabung Haji has done a lot of reform in terms of appointing the right people to the board. So it's very important that, the actions and the decision-making process is conveyed in such a way that people start believing that, we can make a difference, because governance issue, occasionally will happen here and there. But if there is a mechanism to correct and to maintain the balance, so eventually the trust will come back. And this is the perfect time to build trust for two reasons. Number one, with the conflict that's happening in the Middle East and so on and so forth, there is a shift to the East in terms of finding the right place to invest. So if we can show that, Malaysia has a proper governance and more transparent process, so we should be able to attract, investment to build our economy, because eventually economy is built on investment and liquidity anyway. So this is actually quite crucial in terms of pushing Malaysia to the next level.
So now what you're saying, Professor, from the very beginning, as they need to change their structure, as well as due to the fact that we're moving very fast in terms of our economy, what do you think should be the indicator, measurable indicators that should be depositors and investors be looking at in this near future?
You see, sometimes we fail to understand, or we forgot to understand, that Tabung Haji was established for a special mandate. Is to mobilize the fund so that people can actually do, their pilgrimage and everything. So the nature of Tabung Haji itself is basically a long, stable, sustainable, resilient investment. So if you can go back to the mandate and say, this is our mandate and our investment should reflect our mandate, then automatically the shift will change. So you may not try to basically put your investment into, very speculative investment to provide, for example, a return just to make sure that you are attracting and you are competing with other entity. So the mandate is very important. The understand the nature of it is very important. Yes, people are looking for good return, but we do not want a Tabung Haji to become another fund management that simply talks about return. I think it's important that the mandate to allow people to go for Hajj, pilgrimage, sustainable, long term, because that is the nature anyway. You don't save money like 1 year to go for Hajj. It may take basically 20 years.
Yeah.
So sometimes we fail to understand that every GLICs or government-linked investment companies that we have created, there is a mandate for it, and there's a reason why we created it. Not just because everyone has to be equal and try to do the same thing. So the two things I want to answer here is that, number one, let's go back to the mandate and try to bring a much more sustainable investment policy, instead of trying to basically make a quick money or try to put your money in a very risky and speculative investment. That's number one. And number two, I think it's very important that let's not separate between Islamic finance and also Tabung Haji. This is why I'm mentioning this thing. I think it's very important is that because Tabung Haji carry the concept of Sharia compliance, which is very similar to Islamic finance, and Malaysia is probably well known in terms of being a number one Islamic finance. In fact, you just mentioned our suku issuance and so on and so forth. So all these things are interrelated. So we need to protect the ecosystem. So we need to see this thing holistically so that we don't miss one angle just because we want to solve an issue that we have right now.
Well, thank you very much for that explanation. And it seems that the world is looking at us as well. So according to Tabung Haji, it manages savings of millions of Malaysians, right? So what more needs to be done to convince depositors and investors that every ringgit entrusted to Tabung Haji is being managed with great transparency and also accountability as well as discipline?
I think you mentioned in the questions itself the responsibility to the depositors. I think that's the most important thing. So what exactly the depositors want, So again, I keep mentioning these things. The original mandate is to help the depositors, to perform Hajj. But over time, sometimes when you are growing excessively, sometimes you forget your mandate. I think that's very important. Obviously, you want to provide Sharia compliant return, a healthy return, so that you are competitive and the fund can actually grow faster, so that the process of performing Hajj also becoming faster as well. And let's not forget, the cost of doing Hajj is actually getting higher and higher over the years, not just because inflation, but of course the demand that coming from other parts of the world and growing Muslim populations as well, making that Hajj is so. It's important to find a balance between the return and also the mandate. I think that is very important. Again, the process of transparency and accountability, and put the depositors at the forefront of of your commitment. I think that is the key in terms of moving forward with Tabung Haji.
Now, ultimately, that we're seeing that we don't have much time. Ultimately, what does the stronger or more transparent and more trusted Tabung Haji look like to you, and not just for today's depositors or investors, but the future generations of Malaysia?
No, I think you need to basically understand this for the whole ecosystem. I think you need to improve the investment process. I think that is given. The governance process has to be at par with any financial institutions. So you cannot say that we are too big to fail. I think the concept that accountability and responsibility to the stakeholders are key. Again, there is a recommendation that Ministry of Finance actually should come in terms of monitoring performance of the investment side, which is fantastic, which means that there will be a third party of expert opinion ensuring that the things are actually done accordingly. And I strongly believe that our economy is growing enough in the sense that there is a need for Tabung Haji to mobilize its capital to support a certain sector, because number one, we are number one in terms of halal economy. So there is a need to mobilize the Syariah Fund to support the halal pharmacy, halal ecosystem, halal financial institution, and all those things, not only in Malaysia but in other parts of the world. So that's why I feel that, when we bring in the governance of Islamic finance and the standard of the financial institution and proper fit and proper governance in terms of appointing the right people. So I guess automatically the trust will build within the system, and it's just a matter of years. People will just say that they are as good as any financial institution that exists in Malaysia.
Now we've got 1 minute left, but I wanted to ask this question. The RCI revealed that Bank Negara Malaysia warned Tabung Haji 5 times, about the risk of high profit distributions when its reserves were already under pressure. So when an institution is managing billions of deposits, and should high payouts ever come to the expense of financial resilience, how should TH strike the right balance between rewarding depositors and protecting the savings for tomorrow?
I think, perhaps I have mentioned it, but I just want to reiterate the point. Finding a balance between the original mandate and providing a good return, I think, is important. So sometimes we need to draw a 2x2 matrix and say that, so how do we find a balance between return and also fulfilling our mandate? And this is not something new. People are doing it in terms of environment and financial sustainability. So I'm sure Tabung Haji can come up with a matrix in such a way that, this is sustainable and this can shorten the harsh period in terms of accumulating wealth. And eventually, there is no need for Tabung Haji to directly compete with any other fund management. So the mandate and the return should go hand by hand. So that would probably, I say, in terms of answering your question for this one.
Oh, thank you so much for joining us today, Professor. We've been talking to Associate Professor Dr. Muhammad Iskandar Shah Muhammad Rashid, CEO of ISRA Associates. Now that we are at today's end of the discussion, the RCI is not just about understanding what went wrong, but it's about ensuring the same mistakes are never repeated. So for Tabung Haji, strong governance must lead a greater transparency, disciplined investment, and long-term financial resilience. More than 75% of the RCI recommendations may have been implemented, but the real test is not implemented alone in the results. And ultimately, restoring confidence requires more assurance as well. So on behalf of the producer and crew of Biz Malaysia, thank you so much for joining us. I'm Otto Othman. Assalamualaikum and salam Malaysia Madani. Kesejahteraan dinikmati.